And we're back. This is Namrata,
And I'm next.
and welcome to Unsolved, a podcast where we dive into the eerie, the unexplained, and the downright bizarre. Then we take it a step further by asking, what if reality isn't what we think?
Ooh.
So, for this episode, right? Everyone, go there with me. But
You
anyway,
mean look off to the distance?
no, just go there with me.
Okay.
So, let's go back to November 12th, 1966. I know it's far back. I'm not sure if everyone alive. I wasn't.
I wasn't either. There's
Yeah,
no
so
way I was
just
alive.
just go back, right? It's just after 7 p.m. in Clendenin, West Virginia, and there are five grave diggers, like real, actual men, right, who are digging an actual grave in a
An
cemetery.
actual grave? No way. Graves exist. They're real.
And they report seeing something massive that was flying overhead. It was not a bird, it was not a plane, it was something bigger. It wasn't Superman. It was something
Oh,
silent.
wow.
Do you even know the reference?
Yeah, like big, it's faster than a plane.
Yeah, but that's like the original Superman was like that, right? And they would
Yeah.
be like, "Is that a bird? No, is that a plane? No,
No,
it's
it's
Superman."
Superman.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Anyway, for those who didn't understand the reference, just like her,
Okay, yeah, because I'm not old.
neither am I. Anyway, so something
Questionable.
bigger, something silent. It was a dark, human-shaped figure, still not Superman, with huge wings that flew directly over their heads and vanished into the trees.
And then, 3 days later, on November 5th, 1966, two, two young couples in nearby Point Pleasant are driving near an old munitions plant. Right? It's a place the locals call the TNT area, and they spot glowing red eyes in the darkness. As their headlights sweep over the figure, they see a creature standing over 6 feet tall with huge wings folded behind it, and it doesn't move like a bird, it doesn't run like a person, it just stares at them. And suddenly it just takes flight, soaring directly above their car and following them for miles as they speed away in terror.
And this was the beginning of what would become one of the most persistent modern American cryptid legends, the Mothman.
Ooh.
So, for the next 13 months, dozens, possibly hundreds of people in and around Point Pleasant would claim to see the same figure, right? It was tall, it was winged, it was red eyed, and nearly always accompanied by an overwhelming feeling of dread, unease, or just something worse. A knowing that something terrible was about to happen.
And then something terrible did actually happen on December 15th, yeah, another 15th, 1967. Just,
Another 15th?
yeah, because the previous spotting was on November 15th.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, the one I said was 12th. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So basically just over a year after the first sighting, like the Silver Bridge, which basically connected Point Pleasant, West Virginia to Gallipolis, Ohio, collapsed suddenly during like the evening rush hour, and 46 people died in this disaster, and many of them were trapped in their vehicles as the bridge plunged into the icy Ohio River.
And in the days that followed, something else disappeared too, right? The Mothman. So there were no more sightings, no more glowing red eyes in the trees, no more ominous shadows overhead. The creature was gone, and in its place, a permanent link between the strange figure and tragic, large scale disaster.
Since then, the Mothman legend has grown into something much larger than a local tale or a local legend. Reports of similar creatures have been filed in other parts of the world, places with no connection to Point Pleasant. Isn't it so funny that the place is named Point Pleasant and nothing pleasant has happened there?
I mean, technically, it's only a few instances, right? We don't know. Maybe it's pleasant otherwise, all the other time.
Like, I feel like you're just asking for trouble when you name a place something like
It's
that.
like you're challenging the universe to do
Yeah.
something about it.
And it's like,
Yeah.
oh, how funny, how ironic. It's called Point Pleasant and then people die there. Right? It's
Yeah,
really
I get
ironic.
you.
Right? And like places where disaster would like strike shortly after the sighting of the Mothman was like you've got Chernobyl, you've got 9/11, you've got the Fukushima nuclear meltdown, you've got the collapse of a mine in Germany, you've got a deadly swine flu outbreak in Mexico, and the list just keeps growing and growing.
And here's why it becomes more than just a creepy story, because people who have seen the Mothman describe similar symptoms. There's the same intense fear, the same physical illness, the same vivid dreams, the same electrical interference. And they report the same shapes, the same behavior, the same unnatural silence surrounding it. They're often shaken, often confused, but disturbingly consistent on their description.
So, what actually is it, right? Like, is it a supernatural omen, like a biological anomaly, um, possibly a mass hallucination, or it could be something stranger, like a creature that doesn't exist in our world full time but appears only when something is like about to go wrong, like the doomsday fish.
Yeah,
But it does kind of exist full time though. It's just deeper in
yeah,
the ocean.
exactly. So today we'll be examining the Mothman case in full, right? So there's no chaos to this episode. It's just structure.
Maybe a little
With
chaos.
us, I think it's always there.
Yeah.
But it's more about the facts and the eyewitness testimony that we found that has basically followed this mystery for nearly 60 years.
We'll start with the original sightings in Point Pleasant and then move on to the bridge collapse and how it permanently tied a mysterious figure to a real tragedy. And from there, we'll go global, covering alleged appearances before major disasters across the world.
And we'll ask the big questions, right? Is the Mothman real? If so, what does it want? And why does it seem to appear only when disaster is near?
Let's begin with the night that started it all.
So, to understand the legend of the Mothman, what we need to look closely at where it all began, right? Like we said, Point Pleasant, West Virginia. So, a small river on the banks, sorry, it's a small river town on the banks of the Ohio River, which is surrounded by woods, rivers, and old industrial zones. And in the 1960s, it was quiet, rural, normal. But between 1966 to 1967, it became something else entirely.
So technically, it was pleasant for most
Exactly.
of its
Yeah.
time. Yes. But talking about the Mothman, right? The first reports that caught public attention came on the night of November 15th, 1966. The two young couple, Roger and Linda Scarberry and Steve and Mary Mallette, were driving near the abandoned munitions plant, locally known as the TNT area. What they described would become the template for hundreds of future sightings. A tall gray figure with huge wings folded on its back. It stood like a man, moved like nothing they'd ever seen before, and had two glowing red eyes that seemed to reflect or possibly emit their own light.
And according to their statement, when their headlights hit the creature, it didn't run away. It kind of opened its massive wings and launched into the air, not flapping like a bird, but gliding. So it chased their car, flying directly above it, even after they sped off at over 100 miles per hour. And when they reached town, shaken, they went straight to the local police.
And what's important here is that they didn't just report a scary thing, they reported something specific. The eyes, the wingspan, the height, the way you watched them, not like an animal hunting prey, but something aware. Something that could be possibly as intelligent as them or even more.
And the police believed something had scared them. So Roger Scabry was a respected local, and obviously they weren't drunk. They weren't known for pulling pranks. So the police followed them back out to the TNT area. And although they didn't see the creature that night, they did note strange interference on the radio and picked up static in the air.
In the days that followed, the local press ran the story and more reports came flooding in. Some from people who'd already seen something strange and hadn't come forward, and others were new. All seemed to be eerily similar.
On November 16th, a man named Marcel Bennett was visiting family near the TNT area when, when he claimed to see the creature again, this time on the ground. He was standing near his car and he described the same red eyes. I'm sorry. It was not a he, it was Marcella. It's a she.
Yeah?
I'm sorry. So she was actually visiting her family And she was standing this time. So she saw, like I was saying, she saw this creature on the ground. She was standing near her car,
Hmm.
and she described the same red eyes, the same sense of overwhelming fear, and she ran with the baby in her arms and locked herself in the house, kind of refusing to return to the area. I
Yeah.
don't blame her. And again, she wasn't alone. Her relatives also claimed to have seen this creature.
And over the next year, more than 100 people reported seeing the same or similar creature in and around Point Pleasant. Some accounts were vague, like a dark shadow, a strange presence, or an enormous bird, but others were disturbingly consistent. The size, the red eyes, the sense of being watched, the way it seemed to show up near the TNT area only to vanish before it could be approached.
It's worth noting that the TNT area itself is strange, right? So it was used during the World War II to manufacture explosives and is kind of filled of old concrete bunkers, overgrown structures, and underground tunnels. So some people believe that the strange chemicals in the area may have caused mutations in local wildlife, and others claim it's a perfect hiding place for a creature that doesn't want to be found.
And then there's the fear. Nearly every credible witness, even those who only saw it briefly, described a sense of dread. Not fear like I might get attacked, but a deep, irrational anxiety like the world was about to break.
And there were some people in Point Pleasant who actually reported of nightmares. They had strange dreams involving disasters, plane crashes, fire, or drowning. And others said that they began to feel watched, even when the creature wasn't visible. The electronics malfunctioned, dogs were missing. One family said the TV began flickering and their car wouldn't start until they moved away from the area.
It's important to highlight that no one was physically harmed by the Mothman. No reports of attacks were present either. No contact, just sightings and overwhelming unease. And this wasn't a monster and it wasn't hunting. It was just observing.
But then came the disaster that kind of changed everything. So on December 15th, 1967, a little over the year after the first sighting, the Silver Bridge collapsed like we discussed during rush hour traffic. So the cause was later determined to be a failure in the single eye bar in the suspension chain,
Suspicion.
a defect that no one could have predicted. And the bridge fell into the freezing Ohio River, killing 46 people.
I guess that's why they say only in Ohio. The days after the tragedy, several people came forward saying that they'd seen the Mothman perched on the bridge in the days or weeks before the collapse. Some say it was visible just before the failure, and others claim that it disappeared immediately afterwards.
And then, just like that, the sighting stopped.
For over a year, this town lived with an unexplained phenomenon. A creature seen by dozens, if not hundreds, a creature that brought no physical harm, but always seemed tied to dread, and ended its appearances with a very real, very tragic disaster.
And that's what made the Mothman more than a cryptid.
Cryptid, yeah.
It wasn't just a weird animal. It wasn't a local legend. It was an omen.
But what if it was warning us, causing the disaster, or simply showing up as a signal that something terrible was going to happen?
And perhaps the most haunting question is, did it really vanish after Point Pleasant? Or did it just move on? So the Point Pleasant sighting stopped after December 1967, right? So the Silver Bridge collapsed and everything that this whole 13th month wave of strange events came to a close. And for many years after that, the Mothman just seemed to fade into silence.
But then, reports began surfacing from other parts of the world, places with no connection to Point Pleasant, and places that would later suffer major disasters. And in each of these cases, the pattern was familiar. An eerie creature, large and winged, with glowing, not growing, but glowing red or orange
Can
eyes.
you imagine growing red or
That would be so creepy, like even more than this, just like red eyes, I guess. And it was seen by multiple people, often weeks or day before something terrible happened.
So let's start with one of the most widely discussed international claims, right? Chernobyl. which was in Ukraine in April 1986. So it was the weeks leading up to the catastrophic nuclear explosion at Reactor 4. Multiple workers and residents around the facility reported seeing a black winged creature with red eyes flying over the plant.
So, according to the local legend, and we say that intentionally as documentation is sparse, people working at Chernobyl plant began reporting intense nightmares, strange phone calls, and sightings of a flying humanoid hovering over the reactor itself.
And when the explosion happened on April 26, 1986, the creature reportedly disappeared. And the story goes that many of those who had seen it died in the aftermath of the disaster. Some even some even began calling it the Black Bird of Chernobyl.
Is there hard documentation of these sightings? I mean, that would be one question I would like present to everyone. And like the answer would be that not exactly, right? Chernobyl was shrouded in secrecy, but the consistency of the descriptions, the red eyes, the wings, and the sense of dread was enough to grab the attention of a cryptid researchers, especially those already familiar with the Point Pleasant reports.
And then there's Freiburg, Germany, which was in 1978, where a group of miners preparing for their morning shift reportedly encountered a tall, dark figure with huge wings and glowing red eyes blocking the entrance to the mine. Frightened, they obviously refused to enter.
And that same day, the mine collapsed. Several miners, not young people, but like people who mine,
The mine, yeah.
yeah, they were killed, and the ones that refused to enter had survived. So I guess being a scaredy cat comes to your advantage here,
Yeah.
right? And basically, after the incident, the survivors began referring to it as the entity. They like began referring to the entity as,
Why did you struggle?
I don't
It
know.
took us three chances to get there.
Um, der Fenberg or the Fenberg's creature. And once again,
Freeburg. There's no N.
Freiburg,
Frenberg. I think
Flen,
it's Freeburg.
Freiburg. Okay, Freiburg then. And once again, the winged creature, red eyes, growing red eyes. No, it's glowing. Don't take me seriously. Basically, it whatever it went, disaster almost immediately followed.
So now let's fast forward to maybe 2001, right?
24 years ago.
It's a bit more recent. There were claims again, which are obviously hard to verify, that several people reported seeing a winged creature near the Twin Towers in New York in the days leading up to 9/11. These accounts didn't emerge immediately, but rather years later, often from people reluctant to come forward earlier. They described a large dark figure flying near the towers, in one case, perched on a rooftop, with glowing red eyes.
And skeptics argue that these are classic cases of retroactive myth making, that people project.
Not meth, myth.
Did I say math?
Yeah.
Oh, I meant myth making. Um,
Say no drug users on this part.
you never know.
I mean, maybe, but I'm saying
So
that's all.
let's go from the start of what I was saying, right? So I was talking about skeptics, right?
Yeah.
So skeptics argue that like these are classic cases of retroactive myth making, right? That people projected the Mothman onto the event after it happened. But what makes the theory so compelling is that the descriptions remain consistent every single time, even when they come from entirely different parts of the world.
To be more recent, let's talk about
To be
Fukushima.
more recent.
Fukushima, Japan, right? In the days leading up to the earthquake and nuclear meltdown, locals claim to have seen a winged creature flying over the power plant. In some versions, it shrieked, in others, it hovered silently. A few people said that they experienced extreme anxiety or illness immediately after seeing it, and the disaster nearly killed 20,000 people and triggered a global nuclear crisis.
And there's also Mexico City, 2009. During the swine flu outbreak, residents of La what what sound is it if the word starts with a J?
Junta.
Yeah,
La Junta. Should be. I mean, maybe in Japanese it's said a different
but
way.
it's Mexico.
Why did I say
I
Japanese?
don't know.
Yeah, in Mexico, maybe in like Spanish it's said a different way. Maybe the J is silent. They're like, oh, junta, jalap.
Like Jorge, and Jorge starts
Yeah,
with a J.
yeah, and even jalapenos are J A.
Yeah,
So maybe it's la junta.
La Junta.
Maybe.
So it's LA space JUNTA,
Yeah, could be
which we're assuming is La Junta.
because I don't think they have a J. Yeah.
Maybe. So they claim to have seen a creature resembling the Mothman flying above their neighborhood, and they described it as tall with wings and red eyes. And shortly after that, the H1N1 virus began spreading rapidly through the region.
Now let's be clear, right? None of these sightings are as well documented as the Point Pleasant events,
Yeah.
and there's no centralized investigation. So many of them surface years after the fact, and they rely heavily on witness memory, which can obviously be flawed.
But when you line them up, Chernobyl, 9/11, Fukushima, Germany, Mexico, you start to see a pattern. Not of physical attacks, not of aggression, but of warnings. A creature that shows up when something terrible is about to happen.
And theories vary. Some say that the Mothman is a harbinger of doom, not causing disaster but somehow tethered to them. Others suggest it's a kind of psychic projection, a mass hallucination triggered by subconscious awareness of impending tragedy. And then there are those who think it's a guardian trying to warn people, like the miners in Freiburg, before it's too late.
But here's what makes it truly unsolved, right? No one's ever caught it. No one's ever photographed it clearly, and no one knows what it is biologically, supernatural, or even interdimensional. We don't know if the sightings are of the same creature or multiple entities just tied to the same function.
And that kind of brings us to the next question, right? What exactly is the Mothman? So we look at theories, we look at misidentified birds, to interdimensional travelers, and kind of break down the science, the psychology, and the mystery of this whole phenomena. We have covered the sightings in Point Pleasant and then globally. And what stands out most, like we've noticed, is the consistency in the description. There's no one who has a totally different description. It's all literally the same four things. And despite the geographical and cultural differences, they're just consistent. It's tall, it's winged, it's humanoid, often black or dark green color. It has red or glowing eyes. There's a silence and there are high pitched screeches. And it always appears before something catastrophic.
But what is the Mothman? And why does it appear? So, in this segment, we're breaking down the five major categories of this theory. Number one, being misidentified natural species. Number two, cryptid or undiscovered animal. Number three, psychological or mass hysteria. Number four, paranormal or interdimensional entity. Number five, prof, prof
Prophetic.
yeah, that's like you're seeing the future, kind of like that. Right, right. Prophetic phenomenon, a kind of living omen or like a psychic echo.
So let's start with the most grounded theory, right? Let's talk about misidentified birds or animals. So some biologists have suggested that the original Mothman sightings, particularly in Point Pleasant, may have been misidentified large birds. And the most common proposed culprit is the sandhill crane, which can stand nearly 4 feet tall and has a wingspan,
A
of
wing
over
spread.
7 feet. And crucial detail, it has red markings around its eyes.
That does seem plausible, but there's several problems with that theory. Firstly, no sandhill cranes were native to that region at the time. Secondly, sandhill cranes don't follow cars at 100 miles per hour or hover silently above bridges. And thirdly, people are aren't generally traumatized by them.
Well, there's also this barn owl theory, right? So owls can reflect light from their eyes, which might explain the whole glowing red eyes even in low light. But again, owls are small. They don't match the massive size and shape described. So while it's possible that a few sightings of misidentified birds, I feel it's difficult to explain that the entire phenomena is just some misidentified birds.
The second theory is the unknown or cryptid species. So, the Mothman is previously unknown or could be an undiscovered species, like something rare, nocturnal, and intelligent enough to avoid capture or clear observation.
So this kind of places the Mothman in the same category as Bigfoot or Loch Ness Monster, right? The idea here is that it's a flesh and blood creature that we simply haven't identified yet. Maybe a rare mutation, maybe something ancient that survived in isolation.
Cryptid researchers often point to the fact that major animal discoveries still happen. Giant squid, deep sea species, even new mammals have been discovered in the last few decades. So, is it possible that the Mothman is a relic, a survivor, a nocturnal predator adapted to avoid detection?
Possible, yes, but again, the global reach of the sightings kind of complicates this theory, doesn't it? It would have to be special species to be capable of traveling undetected across countries and continents, and would actually have to exhibit intelligent behavior, like I don't know, warning or reacting to events.
Now let's talk about the psychological and or mass hysteria theory. This one suggests that the Mothman is not real in a physical sense, but rather a product of mass suggestion, anxiety, and folklore. Once the initial reports came in Point Pleasant, fear started to spread, and more sightings followed it. So people might have just seen shadows, birds, or animals and just projected their fear onto it.
Yeah, mass hysteria isn't new, right? It's been documented for centuries, from dancing plagues in medieval Europe to waves of fainting or illness in school. Humans are highly suggestible, especially in communities under stress.
But that doesn't explain it all, right? Many of the global sightings preceded media coverage or occurred in isolated areas, and some were reported in cultures that didn't even know about the Mothman legend.
So while psychological factors can amplify the sightings, I mean, I see that point for sure.
Yeah.
But like especially in these localized areas, it's where it could be true. But it's kind of hard to attribute it to all the cases, like especially when you look at international ones. So I feel like mass hysteria alone could not be the
Something
thing.
that could explain it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now we get into like the paranormal theories. So one of the most enduring ideas is that the Mothman isn't a creature from Earth at all, but rather an interdimensional entity, and it's something that slips through from another layer of reality. And everyone knows, if you've been listening to the previous episodes, how much we hate stuff that comes from different realities. Um, and this may also kind of explain why it just seems to appear suddenly and out of nowhere, and why it hasn't been captured clearly, and also why it vanishes after disasters.
Some researchers believe that could be a type of watcher, like a possibly connected to concepts like the ultra terrestrials, beings that exist outside our understanding of physics and basically enter our world only when specific conditions are met.
Another theory is that the Mothman is a type of psychic projection, created not by the disaster itself, but the collective emotional energy surrounding it. Think of it as basically an echo of grief, fear, or danger in like a given form.
So it's obviously speculative, like there's no doubt about it. But these theories try to address the fact that the Mothman doesn't behave like an animal. It's not hunting. It doesn't defend territory. It appears only before disasters, almost like a glitch in the timeline.
And the final theory is more symbolic than scientific. The Mothman is not a creature or a ghost or an alien, but a living omen. It's not causing disaster, it's not warning of disaster, it is disaster itself, a harbinger. Basically, a manifestation of the event before it happens.
And this idea is deeply rooted in folklore. Many cultures have stories of birds, beasts, or shadows that appear before tragedy. The Irish banshee, the Slavic moroi, the Egyptian ba. The Mothman could be a modern incarnation of this archetype, a supernatural entity tied not to death itself, but the anticipation of it.
This would explain why it never intervenes, why it doesn't attack, and why it doesn't stay. It's not here to change fate, but rather to announce it.
So, at the end, what is the Mothman? A misidentified bird, a mutated species, a psychic projection, a cosmic omen? We don't know. And that's why it remains one of the most enduring and unsettling unsolved mysteries in modern folklore.
And coming up in our next segment, we'll look at the people who saw the Mothman, how the encounters affected them, and why many of them were never the same again.
So, for all the theories we've discussed, whether it's natural, whether it's supernatural, whether it was psychological, one fact remains constant, right? Real people reported seeing something. They described it in detail, they gave their names, they agreed to interviews, and many of them stuck to their stories for decades.
And nearly all of them said the same thing afterwards, that it's changed them. Today we focus on the witnesses, the people who encountered the Mothman face to face. Because whether or not you believe in the creature, you can't ignore what it did to the people who saw it.
So the first ones we're looking at are the Scarberry and the Millet couples, which is obviously the first famous encounters. So we've already talked about Roger and Linda Scarberry and Stephen Mary Mallet, and the two couples who saw the creature on November 15, 1966 in the TNT area. They didn't just file a report and disappear from the conversation. They were interviewed multiple times, including by the local law enforcement, the press, and later by journalists and researchers.
According to Linda Scarberry, the experience was deeply traumatizing. She reported having recurring nightmares. She began suffering from anxiety and was eventually hospitalized for a nervous breakdown. And in later interviews, she said she continued to feel like she was being watched, even years after the event.
And Roger Scarberry stood by his story for years. He said he wished it hadn't happened. He never sought fame. They were all shaken, not thrilled, not excited, just shaken. And they described the Mothman as more emotionally disturbing than physically dangerous. It wasn't the creature's size or movement that terrified them, it was the feeling it gave off.
So, one of the most intense early witness reports came from Marcella Bennett. On November 16th, just one day after the Scarberry sightings, she was visiting her brother near the TNT area when she walked back to her car with her baby. She says she saw a creature rising up from the ground beside her vehicle.
She described it as gray with folded wings and glowing red eyes. She froze in fear, then ran back to the house with her child. Her hands were shaking so badly she couldn't open the front door at first. She later said that she felt the creature was intelligent, curious, but not malicious.
Marcella didn't speak publicly about the encounter for some time, and when she did, she described months of intense fear, paranoia, and insomnia. She felt targeted, like the creature had chosen her for some reason, and that feeling lingered for years.
Then there are other local witnesses. So across the Point Pleasant area, dozens more sightings came in over the next year. Some were from teens, others from parents, farmers, even police officers. But again, the recurring theme wasn't physical injury or attack, it was an overwhelming psychological toll.
People described reoccurring dreams of tragedy and death, technology failing when the creature appeared, pets going missing. They feel that like they're monitored or drained after the sightings, and a deep, unexplainable fear that they couldn't shake for months.
And even those who didn't see the Mothman but believed it was real spoke of living under a cloud of anxiety. The town had an edge to it, like something big was coming. And when the Silver Bridge collapsed, the feeling wasn't surprise, it was confirmation.
In the decades since Point Pleasant, witnesses in other locations like Chernobyl, Mexico, Japan have often been reluctant to come forward because some feared ridicule and others didn't want to connect their sightings to a real disaster.
In fact, many global Mothman witnesses only spoke out after hearing about the Point Pleasant case. They heard the description, the red eyes, the wings, the silence, and they realized, hey, that's what I saw.
But here's the key point: almost none of them tried to profit from it. Most did not write books, go on speaking tours, or create fanfare. They just wanted they just wanted that experience acknowledged because for them it wasn't about mystery. It was about trying to process something unexplainable that changed their lives.
And even after a lot of decades, right? Many of the original Point Pleasant witnesses still describe the experience as life altering. Some say they've become more spiritual, others became obsessed with disaster preparedness, and a few moved away from West Virginia entirely, unwilling to stay where it all happened.
Linda Scarberry later said that if I'd seen it alone, I probably wouldn't have said anything. But we all saw it and none of us forgot it.
So maybe the question isn't what the Mothman is. Maybe it's why it chooses certain people to see it and what it does to them afterwards.
Coming up next, we look at the final piece of this mystery. Why does the Mothman always appear before disasters and never after? Is it a coincidence or something much stranger?
Now we've looked at all the sightings, the global incidents, the theories, and the people who witnessed the Mothman firsthand. But one pattern stands out above all others, and it's what makes this mystery so unsettling.
The Mothman doesn't just appear, it appears right before the disaster. Always before, never during, never after. And that's what sets it apart from so many other cryptid or paranormal phenomena. This one is linked to timing.
So let's look at this more carefully, right? In Point Pleasant, the first major sighting was November 15th. The Silver Bridge collapsed on December 15th, exactly 13 months later. During that year, dozens of sightings occurred. Many of them stopped just days before the bridge collapsed. Once this tragedy happened, the creature was gone.
In Chernobyl, alleged sightings occurred in the weeks before the nuclear meltdown. Same with the Freiburg mine collapse. And again in Fukushima. In each of these cases, the winged figure with glowing eyes is seen shortly before the event, sometimes days, sometimes weeks, but never during or after.
This kind of raises the core question of the segment, right? So, is the Mothman a warning, a coincidence, or a cause? So, let's take each of these ideas one at a time and kind of explore and see what we think at the end of it.
Okay, so this is, I think, one of the most popular theories. That the Mothman is a harbinger, right? Something that appears to warn humanity that something terrible is coming, but not to stop it or not to intervene, just to signal it, like a cosmic red flag.
Some theorists even suggest that the Mothman is a guardian spirit or dimensional observer. Not evil, not good, just neutral. And its role is to witness events of mass trauma. And that would kind of explain why it never interacts, never speaks, and never attacks. Its presence alone is the message.
This theory has some backing in folklore. As we mentioned before, cultures all over the world have tales of strange creatures appearing before death or disaster. So we've got the banshee who wails before someone dies. We've got the black shuck, a ghostly dog seen before storms in England, or even the angel of death figure in various religions.
So maybe the Mothman is a modern myth in that lineage, a winged omen for the industrial era. But that begs another question, right? If it is a warning, why don't we understand it? Why doesn't it do more to kind of be easier to understand and maybe to help more chance of preventing something?
I mean, people are scared of it to some extent, right?
Yes.
So
But
I
again, like
think
they say, they're not scared of its look, they're
they're
scared of
scared
just the
of the
feeling it
feeling,
gives.
right? So when we're scared of something, like unlike every single horror movie suggests, if we're scared of something, we don't run towards it. We'd rather run away from it.
True, that's true. But then, I mean, when you, I guess, right, like it makes sense. But then, I don't know, I feel like whether it was the mind thing, right?
Yeah,
It was those few people who didn't go in.
yeah,
But like other people did, right?
yeah.
So, I mean, is it really trying to save everyone? Or is it just trying to save a select few people?
I mean, maybe they it wasn't even trying to save those people who saw it. Maybe it was just trying to observe something, and as like it didn't realize that people were like someone saw it.
But then why would you go and stand at the entrance of the mine?
Okay, I don't have an answer to that.
Right?
Um,
So even in the bridge, it's sitting on top of one of the
yeah,
structures of the bridge, right?
yeah,
Like I see the point where it could be a warning and it's kind of trying to save people, but
yeah.
I feel like I don't know. I mean, maybe
Another
I'm
thing
expecting
is
too
that
much also from it.
yeah, um, and also like I think if people are describing that they're in a sense of crippling anxiety
Yeah,
and like the fear of always being watched, I think a lot of people would not want to seek it out, as they think that if they did, maybe they would find it and they would be stuck like how like Linda and Mary and Roger were.
I see that.
So like they're like, okay, rather they suffer with their entire thing without
Yeah,
knowing what happens, rather than you know the rest of us not suffering.
I guess so. But yeah, I mean, that's weird, isn't it?
Yeah,
Just randomly you see this creature again and again.
yeah, it is. And not even you see it again and again, you feel like you're being watched by it, but you can't see it.
Yeah,
And I think that's more creepy
yeah,
per
of
se,
course.
because you don't know what you're being watched by, but you just know you're being watched.
Yeah, and it's not just that. I don't think anyone likes being watched.
Yeah,
Like it doesn't have to. It's not like, oh, if it's a human, it's okay.
yeah,
Like no one just likes to be watched, right?
yeah. That's definitely true. I think right, because if you're seeking it out, you're kind of seeking out that
Negativity and that
yeah,
feeling. Yeah,
which I don't think
anyone
majority
wants.
of people would
Yeah,
want.
that's true.
And yeah, I mean, if they did, they would have searched for it by now.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Um, Going on to the second theory,
Mm-hmm.
of course, is that there was no actual connection, right? That it was all just a coincidence. And okay, so how this would go in like a timeline would be like people see something strange, then when a disaster occurs nearby, they connect the two events like after the fact, right? It's basic human nature to try and find meaning in chaos.
So this theory actually argues that the most Mothman sightings occur in anxious areas like near old factories, abandoned buildings, decaying infrastructure, places where tension is already in the air. And when something goes wrong, a collapse, an accident, we retroactively link it to the strange thing we saw before.
But the problem with the coincidence theory is the consistency. People from different from different countries, cultures, and backgrounds all describe the same being, the tall, winged, silent, red-eyed creature, and they describe the same feeling, a deep, unsinkable dread. Right?
So coincidence might explain one case, or maybe even two,
Yeah.
but five of them, or maybe six of them, across decades and continents, it surely starts to look like a pattern, right? So I really don't think coincidence is something there.
Um.
What do you
Yeah.
think?
Yeah. I definitely. I mean, if there wasn't that constant thing of everyone describing it as the same, with the same adjectives, with the same kind of appearance,
Yeah,
I feel like then you could still be like, hey, maybe it's a coincidence. Like if one like batch of people were like, hey, it was tall, it was winged, it has red eyes, while the other batch of people were like, oh, it was short, it had wings though,
yeah,
right? You
yeah,
could still push that off as a coincidence because the descriptions are
yeah,
different.
yeah,
But because they're all so similar, like almost like exact word to word copies,
yeah.
is what makes me believe that it's not a
True, right?
coincidence.
Like even the same description in one whole town is
Yeah,
still like okay, fine, maybe possible.
like the word spread it out.
Yeah, but the fact that the whole throughout the world, everyone who saw it had the
It's
exact
yeah,
same.
it's traveling across
Yeah,
continents,
exactly.
right? So I really don't think it could be a coincidence in any shape, way, or form.
I agree. It's
It's too
too
perfect.
many and too too much for it to be a
Yeah.
coincidence. Yeah.
And then we've got the most unnerving theory of all. What if the Mothman isn't warning us, but rather causing the disasters?
So honestly, like this is the minority theory, right? But it also has a chilling logic. Because if one of the creature's presence isn't a signal but a trigger, so what if it drains energy from infrastructure, weakens materials, unleashes psychic tension, and what if it wants to be near collapse?
Some theorists pointed to silence. I mean, its refusal to interact, its vanishing acts, and all of it could point to a being that exists outside our understanding of physics. And it may not even realize it's causing harm, like a cosmic byproduct. Or worse, it may be an apex predator that feeds on suffering.
So this obviously is a darker theory, right? But it kind of explains the vanishing, why it never stays, why it's never caught, because maybe it never needs to. Once the disaster happens, its work is done.
So, which is it? A warning, a coincidence, or a cause?
Honestly, we don't know. And that's what makes the Mothman so terrifying. It doesn't fit cleanly into any category. It doesn't behave like a cryptid. It doesn't behave like a ghost. It just behaves like something else.
It wanted to be unique. Like, it really didn't want to fit into like any kind of box. It was really like, oh, you behave like that, I'm not doing that. You behave like that, I'm not doing that.
Yeah, so what did you, I mean, you guys can tell us what do you think, where it fits into all of this, or whether
Yeah,
it's a mix of all these different theories, or
yeah,
if you have a totally different idea or theory, let us know in the comments, in a mail,
yeah.
in a
Literally
direct
anything.
message, in any way that you wanna.
A direct message. Oh my god, you sound old.
Oh, shut
A,
up.
a DM, a direct message is crazy. But what again catches me off guard? Um, it's not just the what is it like consistent appearances, right?
Mm-hmm.
And them being described.
Mm-hmm.
It's the fact that for the miners, it stood in front of the door, scaring some of them into entrance.
Correct.
Why would it do that if it wants to bring disaster? Because
Maybe
this.
it's maximum people is already inside.
Hey, I have 15 people in, I don't need you.
It'll spoil my calculations. Get
Yeah,
out.
like secretly it's just like a nerd during like math in its head. Okay, if I drop 14 rocks, and I'll destroy this whole place, and meaning there has to be like 15 people inside. But no, oh, three of you want to go in. Oh, my 14 rocks won't be enough to destroy the
Yeah.
place.
But like that also brings me to another thought, right?
Yeah,
If the whole point is that it's other people seeing it, just sit somewhere, it's somewhere
yeah,
far away, it doesn't want to be seen,
yeah,
but it's just kind of showing that it's there,
exactly.
then why did it come in front of those people? Like,
Like, yeah, at the
either you are
entrance.
showing all the way that you're there and you're showing your
Yes,
presence, or you are not showing your presence. What is this? To some people, you show your
right.
presence, and to some people, you
But
do not.
at the same time, the first appearance it showed up to them directly, right?
Yeah, it was in
Right in
front of
front
the
of the
car.
car.
Yeah.
Second one, it showed up right behind her car, beside her car.
Yeah.
Third one, I think it's the bridge.
Yeah.
Yeah, where it just stood silently on
It
one
was
of the
sitting on one
structures.
of the structures. Yeah.
Right. And then the fourth one. So I think really, truly, the odd one out would be the bridge. Because,
But you know what?
yeah,
Um, all of the others,
yeah,
it happened like once, right?
yeah,
But the bridge or Chernobyl or 9/11,
yeah,
they say it kept coming for the few days that led to the disaster.
yeah,
It's not, it didn't come and then something happened.
yeah.
It just kept coming for the few
But
days that led to the
that could
disaster.
also be to the like volume of people in those areas. Because Chernobyl had a lot of people like in it, right? So maybe it's just a shy little baby.
Maybe.
And also the bridge,
Right.
right? A lot of people will be crossing it to try to move from one area to
Yeah,
another.
46 of them lost their life.
Yeah. So I think if it's one on one or like a smaller group of people, it's more comfortable showing itself
Yeah,
because there are only three minors
yeah.
and there's only four in the first sighting, and then in the next one it was just her and her baby and a couple family members, right? So I think it's the volume of people which affects if it's going to be shown right in front of you or hidden somewhere.
Maybe. Really could be.
Yeah. But coming up in our next segment, we've gonna look at what the Mothman represents in culture, in history, and in the human psyche. And maybe this isn't just about a creature, maybe it's about us.
So we've looked at all these reports. We've looked at the global sightings, the theories, and the patterns of disaster. But in this final segment, we want to step away from the literal, right? And talk about the symbolic aspect of it. What does it mean that a figure like the Mothman ever exists in our collective imagination?
Because whether the Mothman is real or not, it has become something more than a creature. It's become a symbol, a cultural archetype, a warning literally embedded in modern psyche.
And that idea of a warning before a tragedy is obviously not new. In many ways, it's deeply human. Our ancestors looked to the skies, the stars, the flight of birds, and the behavior of animals to predict disaster. Before science, we relied on patterns, on signs, on omens.
So maybe it's not surprising that in like an industrial post-war town like Point Pleasant, a place dealing with chemical waste, aging infrastructure, and Cold War anxiety, the modern omen would take form of something mechanical, winged and silent, not a wailing spirit but a cold observer, a moth, a mutation, a creature that feels out of time.
Some have argued that the Mothman reflects our modern fears. It's the fear of collapse, it's the fear of the unknown, it's the fear that we know something is wrong but we're too late to stop it.
And I mean, but like, correct me if I'm wrong, but around this time, do you know about the pepper moth thing?
No?
Okay, so pepper moth is just a thing of evolution, basically, and what's it called? Selection, natural selection.
Mm-hmm.
So, before the Industrial Revolution,
Yeah.
there used to be a lot of white peppered moth.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and because the trees in that area were white,
Yeah.
right? So they were able to blend in,
Okay.
right? So they weren't attacked by predators, and
Okay.
there was a small number of black peppered moths,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which didn't blend into the surroundings. Therefore,
Were endangered.
yes.
Yeah.
Now, after or kind of during the Industrial Revolution, the because of all of the pollution and stuff like that, the white trees were now stained black.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, because of natural selection and stuff like that,
Yeah.
the white peppered moths are now were now starting to become endangered,
Mm-hmm.
while the black peppered moth, their numbers started increasing because they were able to blend into their
Yeah.
surroundings,
Yeah.
right? So, to somewhat of a degree,
Yeah.
could the Mothman be related to the peppered moths?
Oh my god.
Could
I just love this whole connection you made. So it's just one overgrown superhuman
Yeah,
pepper
because
moth.
okay, so they evolved, not evolved, but this change in evolution happened quite fast, and usually evolution takes place over a large period of
Yeah.
time,
Yeah.
right? And there's always a possibility of random mutations,
Yeah.
right? So what if the peppered moth just decided, hey, I'm not gonna be doing this shit anymore, and like, okay, I may be going crazy,
You are.
but like, okay, forget about the whole, could be random mutation, but possibly the name could have been gotten by this peppered moth thing because this thing was really popular during the industrial era
Yeah.
because people would see because this you they were so used to seeing white peppered moths everywhere,
Yeah.
and suddenly they saw black peppered moths and they noticed that it was because of the trees turning black. So I'm guessing it could be because
Could
of
be.
that.
Could be.
And also, like, who would look at a winged creature that's at least above 6 feet tall and say, "Hey, moth," because it. So The wings are folded into its back. Okay, which seems more like a bat thing for me to do.
Mm.
Like if I were to see it, I'd be like, hey, Batman.
Yeah.
Like not the DC Batman, but like an actual Batman.
Yeah.
Oh, DC Batman and Mothman seem to like disasters and like showing up in disasters kind of seem similar. But I mean, maybe it could have gotten its name from that, possibly.
Mm-hmm.
And why do we assume it's a man?
Oh my god, we're not going there.
Yeah. um. Right. So continuing about what you're talking about, that
Finally.
oh, ha 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 ha. The Mothman basically reflects our modern fears. The Mothman might not be a literal monster at all, but a projection of our collective anxiety. Like it appears before bridges.
Bridget's, I'm sorry if you're falling right now.
So funny.
My god, so fake your
I
laugh
know.
sound.
Um, what was that? Bridges? Did I say bridges fall?
You said Bridget's
Shut
fall.
up. Like, or reactors exploding, or cities being struck by disease, because that's when we feel its presence most. So, when we know deep down that something is off, even when we can't name it, the Mothman appears.
And maybe that's why people describe such specific physical symptoms after seeing it, the nausea, the panic, the electrical interference. Not because a Mothman does these things, but because the body, the mind, knows what's coming. And the Mothman is simply the face we've given to that dread.
It's become a symbol of that terrible human experience, realizing something is about to happen and not being able to stop it. It's not the fear of the unknown, but rather the fear of the known that was known too late. Right? The second before the bridge collapses, like the moment before the sirens start.
And in that And in that way, the Mothman isn't just part of folklore, it's part of grief. It's the embodiment of every missed signal, every ignored instinct, every hindsight moment that starts with, I should have known.
And that's why this mystery endures, not just because of what people saw, but because of what they felt. It taps into something ancient, something timeless that need to be warned, and the devastation of realizing that the warning was real but never understood.
So, whether the Mothman is real, imagined, something in between, maybe the lesson it leaves behind is that pay attention, trust what you feel, and listen, even when you're not sure what you're hearing.
Because maybe the next time the red eyes appear, it won't just be a story.
So, what do we make of it? A creature that's seen by dozens in West Virginia in the 1960s, a tragedy that followed, then similar sightings before the disasters, a figure that never speaks, never touches, never acts, but always appears when something is about to go wrong.
Heard the eyewitnesses, we've looked at the pattern, we've walked through every single theory, from birds to biology, mass hysteria, and multidimensional beings. And here's what we can say for sure. We still don't know what the Mothman is, but we do know that it means something.
So, whether it's an undiscovered species or a symbol of warning woven into our subconscious, the Mothman endures because it hits on something very real, the fear that danger is coming. And we won't see it until it's too late. Or worse, we will see it and there still won't be anything we could do to stop it.
And maybe that's why people keep telling the story, because the Mothman isn't just about a cryptid with wings. It's about missed signals, silenced instincts, and the human need to understand the things that don't make sense. The things that shouldn't happen but do.
It's about trying to find meaning in the wake of tragedy, trying to remember the signs and ask ourselves, was there something, anything we could have done?
And maybe that's why it shows up. Not to stop the disaster, not to save us, but to ask us to pay attention, to listen, to feel, to notice what we'd rather ignore.
Because if the Mothman is real, like in any form, if it is real, then the next time someone sees red eyes in the dark, we should be asking a very different question. Not what is that, but what's coming next.
The Mothman kind of feels like, the sixth sense we had as cavemen.
Yeah, true that.
Yeah. So, that's it from us, I guess. This is the end of this episode of Unreal Unsolved. If this one gave you chills, feel free to share it with a friend and leave us a review on Spotify, Apple Music, or whatever you listen. Just any platform which has a listening option, we're there. And let us know, do you actually believe that the Mothman is a warning or a warning we keep missing?
Next week, we shift back into chaos with an Unreal episode based on everything you just heard. Literally everything. Because if the Mothman really shows up before disaster,
Then what happens if we capture one?
see you next time. Stay safe, stay curious, and if you see something in the sky, don't look away, guys. Listen to your instincts
And your sixth sense.
and literally everything you have.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.